Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Daily Objective, the first back on Zoom episode after a full week of live episodes, live from London, which was a lot of fun. And we're going to talk a little bit about, we're also going to talk about maybe what could be, maybe more live events in the future by ARCUK, by TDO. A lot we have to talk about. Today's the Thursday Collective, and you know what that means. We need your super chats. Not sure why it works that way, but we absolutely do. And obviously, in the spirit of traveling and appearing live and doing all that, obviously, money is needed. So keep that in mind. Thank you in advance. And let's meet today's co-hosts. Don Watkins could not make it today. Rozzy Ginsburg didn't really want to make it, or he couldn't. I'm not sure which one it is. I guess we need to talk about missiles hitting Tel Aviv for Rozzy to grace us. I'm just kidding, ish. But we do have Amanda Maxim on her way to join us. And right now, we are here with a couple of fellas. One is this guy, clean-shaven, hair game for days. It's television's Mark Pellegrino.
Hey, Rucka, what's up?
Hey. And we've got this guy, well, I mean, unstoppable. Looks like he's in some beautiful skyscraper over there. Muhammad cartoons behind him. This guy is living the life that he wants, and danger abounds. It's Jonathan Hoenig.
Great to be with you, Rucka. And I'm happy we're going to talk about the event, the European conferences and the European events. I was sorry that I wasn't able to go to them because even from the YouTube perspective, it looked like it was a blast. I mean, you and Amanda were doing kind of live Q&As, you had audiences, you had interfaces with Sargon. And so you made a mark on the continent when you were there. I was happy to see it.
Thanks. Yeah, it was an interesting experience. So it was supposed to be Nikos. Nikos was supposed to be there. And obviously he's a huge part of this show. He's a huge part of the network. So I think in planning a week long of events, Nikos was very much in mind by the organizers. But unfortunately, Nikos couldn't attend until like Friday. Basically, he missed the whole week of live shows because of his COVID-19 status, which luckily he finally tested negative for just in time for the weekend. How convenient. Don't you love when that happens? You miss work all week and then, surprise, you test negative when the weekend comes around. I'm just kind of chiding him in his absence. But yeah, Nikos couldn't make it. So, I sort of stepped up, I guess. I did my job. I hosted. We had Maria joining me on Monday. We had Amanda Maxim joining me Tuesday. We had, Jesus Christ, this was crazy. Claire Fox, a sitting baroness in the House of Lords. What the hell who am I? Like, what is life? Who is this person? Have you heard of this House of Lords?
I'll just say, I'll just quickly, Ruck, I think that's what makes this so exciting. I mean, objectivism is new. It's a new philosophy. And even something as, kind of benign, if you will, as this European conference, this is really at the beginning. I remember that first, they used to call it the Undercurrent Conference, was in DC. So, we're all part of this. Our super chatters, our listeners, we're all part of this movement that, even they talk about the old OCONs, we're relatively modest gatherings, a few dozen people, couple people. So, you're part of building this new movement in the UK. We're all part of it, moving in Europe and spreading Ayn Rand's ideas and meeting people at the same time, interfacing them with, getting to know new friends. It's a positive from start to finish.
So, Rucka, will she renounce her baroness status now that she's becoming an objectivist? I'm assuming she's an objectivist.
Of course, after an hour talking to me, who would not? No, we had an interesting, conversation, interview. Basically, she did, 90% of the talking, which is an interviewer's dream come true, especially when I know nothing about this person and half the stuff she's talking about. But I think I basically picked up what she was saying. She's like, she's an old lefty, like old Marxist type who's very disillusioned with the way the left has morphed, but she has not been seduced by the new right. So she's not turning into this conspiracy Trump fan nut job. She's very much paying attention to the chaos on both sides of the traditional, the mainstream spectrum or the mainstream aisles. And of course, we had a lot to talk about. I had a lot of thoughts to share. But it's just fascinating to me, like an actual House of Lords person there in a church, interviewing her in a church. It was a very nervous week for me, actually. It's quite nervous. Like my mind was ready. Like my mind said, I'm ready for this, but my body was not. My stomach was growling. I just felt very, very nervous, like physically. Does that ever happen to you guys? You guys are obviously, career performers.
Sure. Well, I thought your Instagram didn't belie that at all. It looked like great fun. And it's, I think part of what you said, you would never have seen yourself interviewing, a House of Lords. I think, I'm happy that it's objectivism that's kind of helping you to scratch some of these things off the list. It's kind of fun to be able to push yourself a little bit out there. And, you've always done that, but it was cool seeing you were kind of up at the bema there. Is that what they call that? You were addressing your knuckas in such high style. I was applauding even through my Instagram.
Yeah, I think a lot of Rucka's knuckas were very proud of me being up there on the pulpit and then interviewing a House of Lords member. But I mean, she said she's opposed to the nature of the House of Lords. Basically, everything should be elected. Like every position should be elected. So she is maybe not so sympathetic to the view that like some aspects of the political class or the political setup should be like not democratic, because some people need to kind of just defend the structure itself, the realm, I suppose. But from her perspective, she's like, no, everything should be democratic. So I definitely was calling her out, I think, respectfully, on her contradictions. On one hand, she doesn't like seeing this populism sweep over and seeing people be emotional and easily manipulated and fickle. On the other hand, she wants everything to be democratically decided. So how's that going to work out? I was sort of asking her, and I think she kind of said democracy is still the best hope. Yeah, Mark.
I mean that was an old socio-political notion that the founding fathers dealt with. I think in the 18th century there was the feeling that these social elements balanced each other out, and that was the source of checks and balances. I sort of agree with her in that, and in the founding fathers, I think, finally came to the conclusion that all of these offices should be connected to the people somehow, electorally, but perhaps she means direct elections as opposed to the indirect elections that the founding fathers proposed in their system. But she's sort of right.
Yeah, no, I think it sounds like you're right. I mean, I think I agree with you, and probably the Senate, as it originally conceived in America, is supposed to be that halfway house. They're not entirely prone to the electorate, but also they are, like, they do have length of terms. But eventually, the Senate just became like another Congress, right? Eventually, the Senate is just kind of just like more Congress. They're elected directly by the voters rather than by fellow politicians.
The legislatures, right? By the state legislatures, correct? Yeah.
So ultimately, we're going to have the government that the people want one way or the other. And if the people are ripe for a dictatorship, that's what we're going to have. If the people want, rule of the mob, democracy, that's what we're going to have. So at the end of the day, it's ideas, it's philosophy. And I said that to her, and she was very receptive. So I think there's a lot of overlap. There's a lot of respect, I think, between her and the objectivists.
Well, and Rucka, isn't it even the difference between this idea of a monarchy, right? I mean, England's a monarchy, but kind of wink, wink, nudge, nudge. It's not really a monarchy. She's a countess, but, look at that as compared to what happens in the Middle East, even to this day. In Saudi Arabia, the royal family, it's like they are the ruling family. It's like an old style kingdom and monarchy that you look at now and you think, like, is this even 20th century, let alone 21st century? So, England, from mine eyes, kind of reformed itself. It still has a monarchy. She's a countess, but it's, as you say, it's somewhat a name only. Whereas in other places of the world, they still have that monarchy, that kingdom it's so unbelievably backward to this day. And it doesn't seem like it's moving in the other direction either.
Yeah, I mean, it's England is a monarchy, like Israel is a theocracy. Like there's some element to which, like, you need to be Jewish to maybe to immigrate or to become a citizen. I don't know, whatever exactly it is. But by and large, Israel has rule of law. They've got a system where it's laws and not men who have the final say. And England is a place where they have a king and a queen, but everybody knows it's rule of law at the end of the day. And that is, I think, the essential characteristic of a free country. It's rule of law versus rule of men.
Right. I don't think the form of government necessarily matters too much. Constitutions and separation of powers won't necessarily protect you when the populace is driven by a certain moral ideology and political ideology. As we see our Constitution disintegrating before our eyes over the last 150 years, and the separation of powers becoming sort of a null issue now. It's not even much more power has been invested in the executive over the last 100 years, and the Senate is not the check on the popular will as it was supposed to be. So it really just depends on philosophy. All of it depends on philosophy, not necessarily form of government. You can have a rights respecting government that's a monarchy, even though power is concentrated in the political power is concentrated in the executive. If they respect individual rights, that executive is powerless to do lots of things.
Right. Yeah. Ultimately, it is a philosophy that will, lead us to the outcome politically. It does help to have a good constitution in place. Yaron Brook has pointed out at times that, thank God America has the First Amendment explicitly written. Otherwise, free speech would have been easily, removed from our Bill of Rights or never been able to be protected. Just like in most of Europe, or maybe all of Europe and most of the world, or all of the world outside the U.S., you don't really have freedom of speech. You can go to jail for, quote, hate speech, or in some way speaking in a way that people have a problem with. Whereas in America, it's written explicitly, so lawyers are able to protect you for your,
It just thinks it's funny, apropos of this idea of censorship these days, this hate speech, etc. I mean, as you said, Rucka, in Russia, you remember those images these last couple of weeks of people protesting with blank signs, and the government cops protesting with blank signs. So that happens in a so-called first world country today. To Dr. Brooks' point, to your point, it's really what makes that notion of the importance of the freedom of speech so powerful. And it's one of the things, didn't Rand say that when freedom of speech goes, there's your dictatorship? That's one of the fundamental things that keeps you from having a dictatorship. And how many places around the world they still don't have it?
Indeed, and right now I think the culture is by and large turning against free speech. When you say words are violence, that's the beginning of the end for free speech.
I can imagine free speech eroding in America via the regulation of business, because you have free speech, but if you're a business owner, then of course you can't discriminate. You can't be perceived as discriminating on basis of any characteristic of employees or customers. So I could imagine lawyers and legislators and judges basically using that sort of principle or lack of principle to make it so really now everyone is treated like a business, right? Because everyone, like in the age of social media and stuff like that, they would say, well, even as just a citizen, as a private citizen, you're participating in the market in a certain way. So you're kind of like a business owner. And through a series of manipulations and redefinitions, eventually your free speech is now seen as a form of racial discrimination, or in some way your speech is limited by the way it might affect other people's feelings. I think
the precedent's already been set with the formation of the FCC, right, by Franklin Roosevelt. He used it to hobble his political opponents, and certainly the government controlling standards and practices of the airwaves of film, of TV, whatever it is they control. That is a form of censorship that should not be around. The fairness doctrine was probably another version of the government stepping in, telling people what to say, how to say it. The precedent's been set, and once the precedent's been set, it's done. It's a done deal.
Well, and I want to first thank Sammy for her contribution, and Regina, who points out that she was really happy to meet some of us. We were talking about the review of the conference. So Regina was happy to meet a lot of you at the conference. And it seems, I know, Rucka, it's so easy to get down, and guys, it's so easy to get down about politics. But let me ask you, do you get turned on by turning other people on? I mean, people come to see you at the conferences. Mark, every day we have people who say, oh, I heard about Rand through Mark Pellegrino. Forgetting about, government for a minute, doesn't it kind of excite you to turn people on to something that's really benefited your life?
That's an interesting question. Oh yeah, it absolutely gets me off, but we're not here to, I mean, that's a whole different episode. I'm kidding. But I mean, it's an interesting question. You know, when you get so much negative comments from people, when you get so much criticism, you kind of want to take it all feedback with a grain of salt at a certain point. Maybe that's just me. Maybe that's not the best way to operate. But I mean, so a lot of people have told me, especially during the trip last week to England, wow, I learned about Ayn Rand because of you, or I first read Rand because of you. I mean, obviously that's a huge honor and a huge responsibility, and it's pretty amazing. But also we know tons and tons of people have read Rand and ended up complete nut jobs and worse than they were before. So maybe I'm afraid to just let myself feel good and be happy when I hear that type of thing. What about you guys? Obviously, you've both spread the gospel in your own careers.
Yeah, for me, it's very rewarding to see people receptive to the ideas, especially after the criticism. You know, it's like, to me, the criticism just lays down the fertilizer for you know, the feeling of joy that I get when somebody actually receives the idea. So I love it. I think it's great.
Yeah, and I have really come to love the in-person. That's why I was really sorry I was able to hit this conference, this UK conference. I'm looking forward to coming out again. It's because, you know, it's fun to basically just break bread with people. And even though you don't have the same necessarily experiences, different backgrounds, things like that, you know, you see the world in just a little similar way. And it's just great fun. It's so meaningful to kind of make those friends and have those friends. I mean, Robert Nasser is in the super chat. He's talking about it was a magnificent week with outstanding people. You know, Robert is kind of the best example of that. He's a gregarious man. He's an interesting, fascinating guy, and it's just fun to be around. So I think that, you know, when I was just getting into objectivism, I felt like, ooh, who are these people? You know, do they speak in a different language? These just like interesting people with an interest in life, and that ultimately I get so much amount of being around that community. So that the fact that the in-person events are coming back, the Ayn Rand Center UK is really pushing that. It's a great reason to step up the super chats. You know, brings people like Rucka and all the rest, Lisa Van Dam, out to the UK to meet with all of you and to break bread.
Yeah, it is pretty amazing. I remember many years ago, almost 10 years ago, I went to my first ever objectivist event in Chicago, and I drove there from Detroit. And at this point, I had been reading Rand for many years and developing in my own intellectual life. And then to meet other fans of Rand was pretty exciting. And of course, Jonathan was the token, the local celebrity in my world. I had seen Jonathan on. Come on. I mean, I meant in that community. Yeah, but generally celebrity anyway. Yeah, I'd seen you on Fox, not just business, Fox Business. No. Fox. I had seen you, Jonathan. Actual Fox News in the Saturday mornings, yelling over the others. And it was pretty exciting for me to meet you. And here we are. And then here we are actually hosting a show together. That's pretty surreal, pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of what I just enjoy about the Daily Objective, the Ayn Rand Center UK, why I hope people continue to support us, is bringing people together, people from entertainment. I mean, all the interesting business people associated with objectivism, the innovators, with Boom and all the rest. I mean, interesting people doing interesting things. So it's, it's a philosophy for living on Earth, but it certainly makes that life a lot more fun to live. So let's keep these in-person events going and keep the movement going as well.
Yeah. All right. We've got in the regular chat, Robin is saying the speakers don't really match the topic today. Well, we apologize for that. We'll try to do better for you. Allison wants to ask me why I wanted to have a discussion with Benjamin Cox. I really don't know who that is. So, I mean, yeah, see, general, it's you get one compliment for 3 items of criticism, it seems like, but maybe I'm just focused on the negative. So that's why I just try to just kind of stay in my lane, just kind of focus on what I'm doing. And, yeah, I don't know. Maybe I've gotten a bit guarded. Maybe I try to keep the audience at arm's length a bit, just because of how much craziness I've seen. Not referring to the people in the chat today, but just in general in life. Have you guys dealt with any crazy people?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah. Jonathan, are you the crazy person in some of your interactions? I'm joking. And yeah, Jonathan,
well,
do you have
say,
a comment?
you know, no, I mean, it's Rucka. I was going to say when you were mentioning when you first met me years ago, and having met you and known about you and know about all your entertainment life and all you've accomplished in that, and the kind of what you've pulled and accomplished like that. I'm still so like, look, I've read the articles lambasting you. You're in the Daily Mail. I mean, people know a bit about your history. I mean, Rucka's been just, gotten lots of criticism, lots of love. He's been out there in such an amazing public way. So I'm surprised on some level that it stings. Anything stings you anymore, because I feel like, you at a early age, you were fighting global battles with haters. So it's nothing new for you.
Yeah, no, but I mean, on the question of like meeting people who said I introduced them to Rand, like, isn't it cool to meet people? It's like, yeah, but like when so many people have turned out to be kind of crazy, or like, or you get so much negative feedback from people at a certain point, you just try to, I don't know, you just kind of try to focus on your job. And that's kind of to the extent that I know Yaron Brook, that's kind of the impression I have of him. It's like at the end of the day, he's just focused on his job. He accepts the positive feedback. He doesn't lash out at the negative criticism. He just, at the end of the day, he's like someone who's just been focused on his job, which is to get the word of Ayn Rand out there. And so he's become someone I quite admire the more time passes. So yeah, he was there this weekend.
We're hopefully introducing people to Rand, applying Rand, talking about Rand. But if people kind of take it, I mean, it's on them, right? They take it and they make their own choices. They go their own ways, and But so I don't think someone can be hurt necessarily by reading Rand. I think whatever element of Rand, even a religious guy reads Rand, I think it's a benefit for them. But they live their own lives from that point on. It's not in your charge at that point.
True. All right. Super chat from Robert. Allison is locked out of the super chat, says Robert, but asks, Rucka, why did you want to have a discussion with Carl Benjamin, Sargon? She doesn't find anything of value with this guy. His views are overreaching. Well, so that brings us to another event from this past week. It was the closer of the week. My reunion with Sargon of Akkad, as he used to be called, and now he's Carl Benjamin. Well, I mean, are you guys much familiar with this Sargon character? He's quite a figurehead. He's quite he has been quite a significant face and name in the world of the internet over the last like half decade or so. I'm just curious, you guys even know who that is?
I think it didn't Greg Salameri have a little conversation with him, and has Yaron also sat down with him?
Yeah.
But I've seen him,
and both of which would not have happened but for my kind of friendship with Sargon years ago, like kind of getting myself into the world of talking ideas. So Sargon, he was sort of like the the first person I kind of wanted to affect. He kind of represented this anti-political correctness, anti-social justice group of people. A lot of them were like into video games. They felt their video games were being threatened by the social justice left. And they sort of turned away from the left. Now suddenly leftist was turning into an insult and communist was turning into an insult. And it was kind of a new era abound. And it kind of made me want to kind of get out there and start talking about Ayn Rand and kind of let people know that Ayn Rand exists and that she's sort of on the menu, so to speak. She's an option. So Sargon Carl was someone who I had spoken to about objectivism, and over the years that we had occasionally spoken. So it was kind of it was a cool opportunity to kind of catch up with him and to reflect on the last several years. So I can understand maybe from the perspective of someone that doesn't even know who he is, it seemed like kind of a pointless discussion, maybe. Super chat.
Go. He's an important cat. I think he was. Well, he had a lot of influence. So I think it's.
And Roland said, and thank you for your contribution. Roland said he was sad to see Carl Benjamin had turned conservative, but Rucka did great in the talk. Here's my kudos.
Thanks. He is an important person, like Mark is pointing out. Anyone who's influential, I think, is worth talking to, at least for public relations sake, but also, cosmically or like spiritually, I'm trying to say, like spiritually, friendship and bonding with people. These are like things to explore and to understand, like where, like how does personal friendship relate to philosophical differences? At what point does a difference in philosophical convictions and premises mean you should or shouldn't be friends with somebody. Stuff like that is, to me, a fascinating thing to explore. So Sargon, like just who he is, not publicly, to me, it's just very decent and just like a really nice guy. So it was just like
and on that's a personal level. I think on a more wide scope, it's important for people to see the distinctions between objectivism and conservatism. A lot of people have in the sphere of not knowing who Rand is, but hearing about her, think that she's sort of at the forefront of the conservative movement. They equate objectivist principles often with conservatism, and I think it's important for us to distinguish ourselves from the conservative movement.
Yeah. Now, back when Carl/Sargon first was making content, he would refer to himself as an old lefty, as opposed to this new left that was the social justice left. And my sort of introduction to the world of philosophy on the internet and commentary and politics was to kind of tell people like him, where you're heading is probably the conservative scene. Like that's all you're doing is becoming another conservative. We've seen this. Decade after decade, the neoconservatives, they were like former communists who became conservatives. And then after 9/11, a bunch of sort of lefties became conservatives because they felt, that the conservatives had better answers with the war on terror or whatever. It's just, we see this over and over again. And I basically I was telling Carl in the first place and his audience, a lot of them, like, you're all just going to become just another generation of conservatives. And, yeah, I kind of called it, because what can you become?
Yeah, but do you think objectivists sort of pass through the conservative stage, especially if they started out on the left? Don't you think politically they pass through that stage for a bit, and then discover that the waters aren't quite as interesting there as they are in classical liberalism or some other form of politics?
Yeah, I hate to admit it, but I mean, that happens. After I read Atlas Shrugged in my late teens, then I started listening to conservative talk radio and watching Fox News. And I thought, well, I don't always agree with them, but at least they're not the left. But thank God, again, I'm heaping praise on Yaron Brook today, and rightfully so. He was the guy who was out there embellishing or highlighting the differences between Rand and the conservatives, showing why Fox News in some ways is as stupid as everyone else and as detrimental to the cause of capitalism. And turned out he was quite correct in my estimation of things. So something I said to Carl during that conversation was, you must not get to talk philosophy very often these days, meaning like the right, the conservatives, they become like anti-philosophical, or maybe they were already, but like they went from there was this scene of people talking philosophy in response to the left, in response to the social justice left. They were talking philosophy, asking deep questions. Today, it's all just voter fraud, COVID, and stuff and trans issues. Like, none of it is actually like ethics. None of it is like, what is reason versus faith. None of that seems to be relevant anymore.
But when you're passing through that conservative stage and you're exposed to people like Charles Krauthammer, Thomas Sowell, Walter Williams, Cal Thomas, and you're reading these people, and they certainly had a deeper bench intellectually than anything that was being offered on the left. This is 20, 25 years ago when I would read I would read their syndicated columns, and it's seductive for a while until it's not.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I don't know if there's anyone on the right like that anymore. It seems like the most sensible non-objectivists today are these sort of centrists, these sort of like left-leaning people who are very much not on board with what the left is becoming, but they're very apprehensive about this whole Trumpian right. So people maybe like Barry Weiss, Claire Lehman, maybe she's got a lot of wrong with her, but she seems pretty sensible from what I've seen lately. So Lex Fridman, not that he's like a political pundit, but kind of I think what he represents in this sort of landscape as these people, they don't want to go with either camp. They just sort of want to stick to like what the science and the sort of quote common sense thinking leads to. So that I think if there's any hope, it's with them.
I applaud what you guys do, what Rucka do. You bring Rand to the table with a guy like Sargon. Yaron brings Rand to the table with all the people he sat down with, Ben Shapiro and all the rest, and distinguishes objectivism. I mean, look, there's a lot of people who've read objectivism. I mean, Dave Rubin, he was into objectivism. He's seemingly gone completely kind of full bench conservative. So I appreciate the fact that you do distinguish that, you know, Rand not only didn't vote for Reagan, she despised Reagan, despite the fact everyone says, oh, Reagan and Rand. She wrote an article called Conservatism and Obituary, which explained why as it is. She wrote it, I think, in the 1970s, because there was an obituary. So, you know, Rand saw this, she saw this splintering, and she, I think even then, this is my interpretation, wanted to distinguish that objectivism is not conservatism. It's something completely unique. It's a philosophy, and that's what people should focus on learning.
Jonathan, were you saying Dave Rubin used to be an objectivist, or that he was sort of adjacent to the whole, like he was?
Well,
sort of nearby?
I remember seeing Dave Rubin at OCON and feeling he just seemingly was espousing a lot more sense than what I've heard him lately. Not that I'm really on the lookout for what Dave Rubin is saying, but he seemed to kind of go straight up.
Maybe I'm taking
conservative.
Maybe I'm putting too much credit. I think I was the first objectivist that he ever interviewed. And I think there were a lot of unconventional things that I said, and I introduced him to the objectivists that he later interviewed, and I think they influenced him greatly away from his leftism. But a lot of people do fall into the, I want to say, the easier camp of conservatism. You know, it's not only more populist. You notice that guys like Zuby Music, you know, conservatives like him, or even James Woods, you know, they get massive followings of people because it's sort of, you know, they are as bromidal in a way as the left. They'd say easily packaged things that, you know, that I think people digest much more easily than they do the complexities of objectivism. So I think popularity wise, it's easier to fall into the conservative arguing points. And it's too bad that Dave has swung in that direction. But I think he was feeling the pinch recently, right? Didn't he and his husband just announce that they got a couple of kids and some conservatives came down on him really bad? So maybe he'll change his mind.
And Robin is pointing out, thank you, Robin, that Dave Rubin's interview with Rucka introduced her to objectivism. And, you know, Mark, as you said, you introduced Dave to objectivism. So, you know, you guys have both kind of helped, you know, get Rand out there and spread the word and influence a lot of people, even if Dave, you know, went the other way. You know, you brought Rand to the table and having a positive impact on a lot of people.
Well, this is the stage that he might have to go through. Like I had to go through in my 20s. He's going through it later in his life because he was introduced to Rand later in his life. So I'm sure it's just a phase.
Yeah, any minute now. Well, look, first of all, it takes a lot of motivation for someone to even be open to a brand new philosophy and a radical new philosophy like objectivism. And if there is any hope with Rubin, I think it would be that the right ends up completely turning on him. Like a lot of conservatives turn on him because he's gay. And it's like it's finally in their face now that he's adopting, or not adopting, that he's in surrogation, whatever, however it works. By the way, which one of them is going to be the biological father? Can they mix them together? Is it like a lottery? They just drop both of their specimens in and do they take turns? But anyway, if there is any quote hope for Rubin, I think it would be that he finds the right turns on him the way the left did. So in the first place, he was like this outspoken atheist. Then, you know, with time, he was sort of represent one of the figureheads of this sort of like leaving the left movement. And Sargon, Carl Sargon was one of the, Carl Sargon, it's almost like Carl Sagan, but he was, Carl was sort of like the gamer, like the sort of raunchy figurehead of that whole movement away from the left. And Rubin was more like the adult version of that, the sort of like Fox and Friends in the morning figurehead of that. And ultimately I told both of them, you're both basically just going to be conservatives in a couple years. And they both did.
You know, I think the Svengali and the Dave Rubin equation was Jordan Peterson. I think he was headed the right way, and then Jordan came and just ambushed him intellectually. And I mean, I went to that conference where Jordan came and sat down with Euron and Greg Salameri, and Dave Rubin sort of moderated the event. And there are a lot of objectivists that were quite irritated with the fact that they didn't think we took advantage as objectivists of that moment to sort of expose Jordan Peterson. But I thought Jordan was very compelling. I thought he has a way about him that is magnetizing. It's something that we could use in our intellectual movement. And it swayed David. Dave went on tour with this guy and spent a lot of time with him. So I think that's what sort of turned him. When you spend that much time with somebody like Jordan Peterson and don't counter it with people like Yaron Brook or Jonathan Hoenig or you, Rucka, or me, then you're going to have different thoughts.
Yeah, and there's the consideration of his career and his audience, what they want, what works. When he posts Kamala Harris said what title, that performs very well. And if he's, talking to Yaron Brook for the fourth time, it maybe won't perform as well. But there's a lot that goes into the depth of Dave Rubin. But I will say, I think we're kind of doing the Jordan Peterson thing here on this channel with these sort of like open format discussions and monologues, trying to grapple with ideas in a certain way. I think we're creating something very organic and accessible and just very personal and honest. That's in a different category from like packaged presentation of like, here's objectivism. It's more like, I've been thinking about this a lot, kind of a Peterson type of thing. And so I think we have learned from him. And by the way, for historical reference, for posterity, I just want to mention Dave Rubin and Yaron Brook, as I recall, were scheduled to go on tour together. That's how much less how much less famous Rubin was at the time, that like a tour with Yaron Brook and Rubin was realistic and they were going to do it. And then Jordan Peterson invited Rubin to open for him. And the rest is, as they say, history. Rubin obviously, would never be accessible to the objectivist the way he used to be, and of course, intellectually, he went completely towards religion and all of that. So, but yeah, we came this close to having a Dave Rubin, Yaron Brook tour, and who knows how that would have affected Rubin and who that would have exposed, which audience Yaron Brook could have reached if that tour had taken place. So, just for posterity, I wanted to mention that. All right. Did we read?
I'll just say, my goal in my TV appearances and with the channel, at least my goal ultimately is to get people to read Ayn Rand. A little bit, a lot, a whole book, a little essay, get people to read Ayn Rand. Not, my opining about it, get people to read Ayn Rand. And what I found, at least in my experience, Rucka, in TV, is that you mentioned people are going conservative. I feel like I used to be a hero with conservatives. They used to love me. They hate me now. They're the ones that say I'm aligned with big tech. I'm in big pharma's pie. So I feel like the political winds shift, right? I mean, the right now adopts things that the left used to. They go back and forth. But objectivism is not on that right-left spectrum. It's something else. So my goal is get people to read Ayn Rand, get people to discover objectivism to whatever extent they will.
Right. And I think the good thing to come of the silver lining, so to speak, of the way the right has morphed in the last few years is that now if someone's interested in capitalism, if they're interested in individualism and reason, the objectivists are more or less the only show in town. Maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration, but it's looking more and more accurate with each passing day, which brings us to Robert's super chat. I don't think we read it. He says, it seems obvious to us that the left is a nightmare and the right is the worst possible response to the left. And what's needed is a pro-reason, pro-individual, pro-capitalism movement. Yeah. It's the positive we need to focus on, right? And Robert, again, with $2 says, always a solid approach. Let Rand do the work. Absolutely. The more people read Rand, and the more, I think, reasonable, not crazy people are presenting Ayn Rand, and maybe the three of us are not the best example of non-crazies. We're a little bit excitable at times, but we've got a lot of very smart and coherent people out there, and on this channel, obviously, advocating Rand. So the more people read Rand, I think the better the world will become.
Well, amen. And we'll go ahead, Mark, please.
No, I just said amen. Amen.
Amen. All right.
Well, we'll be back here tomorrow. That I know for sure.
Yeah, tomorrow's Friday. I'll be on here with Jason Rines talking more about Nietzsche. We spoke about Nietzsche previously. Now we're going to be talking about Nietzsche vis-a-vis Ayn Rand. So that's going to be a very dense discussion, I can imagine. All right, if you guys have time.
I have to say, I'm really curious about that because Rand, I know admits to kind of on some level being influenced by Nietzsche. And people say, oh, well, Rand is all the Ubermensch of this. So your discussions with Jason are so interesting. They're really deep. They're fascinating. They're integrating objectivism with all of Jason's expertises. So it's really heavy level stuff. I'll be looking forward to that tomorrow.
Yeah. I'm looking forward, of course. Robert, again, in the super chat says, to be clear, you three are heroes of objectivism. Well, that's very kind. That's a compliment.
Thank you, Robert.
All right. So anyway, long story short, that was our week in London. Thank you all for being there or for watching online, and see you soon again. I definitely enjoyed traveling. I missed the stage. I missed seeing fresh faces. It's been a very weird couple of years with the lockdowns and all that. So it was a real like antithesis to be with a lot of you in England and to be traveling and all of that. So let's do that again, I say. And next time I want Jonathan and Mark to be there, even if it means quitting your other jobs and absolutely dedicating yourselves to the Daily Objective, which I think
sacrificing yourself is what you're saying.
Absolutely right. I'm joking, of course. Hope you guys can make it next time. By the way, I have an idea. I don't know if I should announce this on the internet, but it's my idea, so I don't see why I shouldn't announce it. My idea is ARCUK Austin Week. Whoa.
Nice.
Curb your excitement there. No, that's my idea, right? Bring it to Austin. Obviously, we got a lot of speakers and guests here just in town, or people who could easily come to Austin. Lots of people here who can fill an audience. Austin Week. And I don't even need to travel for once. All right. Thank you, Frank.
Thank you, Frank. Big Frank.
He says capitalism, live to win. Absolutely right. All right. By the way, if you guys are down to jump on Clubhouse for a little bit, we can see what the audience has to say and wrap it up there. So we'll jump over to Clubhouse right after this, and we'll be back here tomorrow for the Daily Objective. Coming up later today at 8 p.m. UK time, it's Enjoy Parenting with Lisa Van Dam and Kyle Steele. They're going to be discussing adults say the darndest things. Actually, okay. It was 7 p.m., not 8 p.m. UK time. So that was a lie when I said 8 p.m. Top of the hour, in other words, coming up in 17 minutes. All right. Thanks, guys. This was a really interesting discussion about a series of events that only I was present for. But as we know on this show, we can turn anything into an episode.
Thanks, man.
We'll do it. Be well.
All right. See you guys soon. Thank you all, and goodbye.